Imagine an adult in Australia opening a social media account they have used for years. Nothing dramatic has happened. No warning about a hacked password. No accusation that they broke a rule. Instead, the account presents a different kind of problem. The service is no longer fully confident that the person behind it belongs on the adult side of an age boundary. This scene is reconstructed, but the system behind it is real. Since December 10, 2025, certain social media platforms in Australia have been required to take reasonable steps to stop Australians under 16 from creating or keeping accounts. And in August 2026, Meta said it had deactivated 462,000 Instagram accounts and 294,000 Facebook accounts it suspected belonged to Australians under 16. That is roughly 756,000 accounts, according to Meta. At the same time, government figures and independent studies reported by Reuters suggested that more than 8 in 10 under 16s were still using social media during the first 3 months of the restrictions. So even the effectiveness of the system is still being fought over. But there is another question hiding inside the enforcement effort. To keep a 15-year-old out, how does a platform establish that everyone else is old enough to stay in? And how much should an adult have to reveal simply to prove they are not a child? The obvious answer is identification, a passport, a driving license, a government document with a date of birth. Except Australia does not allow a covered platform to make government-issued identification the only route. If ID is offered, the platform has to provide a reasonable alternative. So the story does not begin with a passport, it begins with a classification problem. The Australian rule places the responsibility on platforms, not on parents, not on teenagers. Platforms are expected to take reasonable steps to prevent under 16s from holding accounts. That phrase, reasonable steps, matters because the law does not prescribe one single machine, one single database, or one single method that every company must use. The regulator's guidance describes a system in which age can be assessed through different methods, often in stages. That turns a legal threshold into an operational question. A service has millions of account holders. Some are clearly adults. Some are clearly children. Many are somewhere in between, from the platform's point of view. The company has to decide which accounts can pass without interruption, which deserve another check, and what happens when the answer remains uncertain. There is a second human reality inside that rule. Picture a 15-year-old trying to sign in after school and finding that an account is no longer available. That scene is reconstructed too, but it represents the person the policy is actually aimed at. For a regulator, preventing that login is the objective, not a side effect. The Australian framework is explicitly built around reducing the exposure of younger users to online harms and creating age-appropriate experiences. That matters because the adult burden does not appear from nowhere. It is created by a genuine enforcement problem. A platform cannot reliably protect one age group if it has no credible way to distinguish that group from the people just above it. The tension begins when solving the child safety problem requires decisions about everybody else. Meta's figures show the scale of that exercise. The company said that from shortly before enforcement began through June 2026, it deactivated hundreds of thousands of suspected under 16 accounts across Instagram and Facebook. Meta also said it was using artificial intelligence to look for contextual clues that an account might belong to someone under 16, including things like birthday celebrations or mentions of school grades. That detail changes the texture of the story, because the person being assessed may not begin by handing over anything new. They may already have spent years handing the platform pieces of themselves in ordinary use. Consider the reconstructed adult from the opening. For most of their life online, adulthood may have functioned as a quiet assumption. Unless they entered a casino, an adult content site, or another obviously restricted environment, nobody needed to stop them at the door and ask them to prove that they were old enough to be there. Now imagine that same person inside a mainstream social platform where age is not merely a profile detail. It can affect whether the account is allowed to exist. The account is no longer just an account. It sits behind an eligibility decision. Australia does not require every adult to upload government ID, but that creates a harder question. If the platform does not begin with your passport, what does it begin with? One answer is that it may begin with the account itself. Australia's e-safety guidance describes what it calls the use of existing data and signals. The idea is simple. Before asking a person for more information, a platform may be able to use information it already has to judge whether an account is likely to belong to someone over 16. An old account can itself be evidence. If an account has existed for 16 years, the platform may have a strong reason to believe the current account holder is not 15. But account age is only one possible signal. The guidance lists engagement with content aimed at children or early teens. It mentions linguistic analysis that may indicate a user is likely to be a child. It describes analyzing text that a user has posted. It includes facial age analysis, performed on photos or videos already uploaded to the platform. It also includes age estimation from voice. It includes activity patterns consistent with school schedules. It includes connections to other users who appear to be under 16, and membership in youth-focused groups, forums, or communities. The guidance warns against relying on most individual signals in isolation. The suggested model is cumulative. Several weak clues can become a stronger basis for deciding whether an account looks likely to belong to a child. This is not the same thing as saying that every Australian platform uses every one of these signals, or that every post and message is being constantly analysed for age. It is more precise and more consequential than that. The regulatory architecture explicitly contemplates age inference from data produced during normal platform use. Picture two adults. The first created an account more than a decade ago. Their account history, settings, interactions, and other available signals create little reason for the system to doubt that they are over 16. They open the app and nothing happens. The second is younger, maybe 18 or 19. Their account is newer. Their activity happens to resemble some of the patterns associated with younger users. The evidence is not strong enough to conclude that they are a child. It is only strong enough to create uncertainty. They open the same app. This time, a prompt appears. To the first person, there was no age check. To the second, there suddenly is one. But from the platform's point of view, both accounts may have passed through an age-related decision process. One simply generated enough confidence to remain invisible. That is the first information asymmetry in this system. The user sees a page, an account, a feed. The platform may see a bundle of indicators and a confidence level. And the visible request for proof may not be the beginning of the process at all. It may be what happens after the quieter methods fail to produce a confident answer. That matters because it changes what an age check feels like. A request for a selfie or a document can look like a sudden intervention. But in a layered system, it may be an escalation. The platform has already tried to answer the question with less friction. Only now is it asking the user to participate directly. Australia's guidance even recommends a successive validation or waterfall approach. Start with methods that require less data and cause less disruption. Then escalate when those methods are inconclusive. The least visible users may therefore be the ones the system finds easiest to classify. The most visible gate may appear to the people who fall closest to uncertainty. So, when people say age verification, they often compress several very different processes into one phrase. That makes the debate harder to understand than it needs to be. Age assurance is the broad category. It covers different methods used to verify, estimate, or infer a person's age or age range. Age verification is narrower. It uses stronger evidence tied to an actual age or age status. A government document can do this. So can other verified records or credentials, depending on the system. Age estimation does something different. It does not necessarily confirm a birthday. It uses physical or behavioural characteristics to estimate likely age. A face can be used for age estimation without being used to identify who the face belongs to. A voice can be analysed for age-related characteristics without functioning as a voice identity check. Those distinctions matter. Calling every face-based age estimate facial recognition would confuse estimating an attribute with identifying a person. Then there is age inference. Inference draws a conclusion from information that is not itself a date of birth. An old account, a verified email associated with adult records, behavioural patterns, contextual signals. Existing information that, taken together, suggests which side of an age threshold a person is likely to fall on. These methods can be combined. A system can infer first, estimate second, verify third. That is why asking, "Will I have to show ID?" is only part of the story. The more revealing question is what information the service actually needs in order to make the eligibility decision. Imagine a nightclub door. The bouncer can inspect your driving license. That reveals your name, exact date of birth, photograph, and often your address, even though the only question the venue really needs answered is whether you are above a threshold. Digital systems create the possibility of separating those things. A credential could answer only one question: over 18, yes or no. The website would not necessarily need the exact birthday. It would not necessarily need the legal name. Identity and age are related, but they are not the same information problem. That distinction will become crucial later. Because if a service can verify that someone is old enough without learning who they are, then the debate cannot be reduced to a choice between total anonymity and handing over a passport. There is a spectrum of possible designs, and even the most privacy-preserving design still depends on one thing. The system has to reach a decision about which side of the threshold the user belongs on. Before getting there, though, there is a more immediate human problem. What happens when the system gets it wrong? Imagine a 19-year-old Australian opening a social account after work. Again, this is a reconstructed scene. Their face is young, their account is recent. The system does not confidently recognize them as an adult. An age estimation step produces an uncertain result. The person already is old enough. But now, reality and system status have separated. In ordinary life, their age is a fact. Inside the platform, adulthood has become a claim that may need to be established. This is where accuracy stops being a technical metric and becomes a lived experience. Australia's regulatory guidance points to results from an age assurance technology trial showing that tested estimation methods become less accurate near legal thresholds. It also notes continuing demographic fairness challenges, particularly for people with darker skin tones and for users aged roughly 16 to 20. That does not mean every age estimation system performs badly, or that every method produces the same disparities. It means the hardest cases are often exactly where the stakes of a binary decision are highest, near the line. The guidance discusses buffer zones for that reason. Instead of pretending that an estimate is perfectly precise, a A system can treat some results as uncertain and ask for another check. That may reduce the chance that a child is incorrectly treated as an adult. But it can also create the opposite problem. An eligible user can be overblocked. For the 19-year-old, that distinction becomes concrete. Maybe the first method fails. Maybe the second method is inconclusive. Now the person is not trying to gain special access. They are trying to restore ordinary treatment. The burden has reversed. The system has not proven they are a child. The user has to provide enough evidence to correct the classification. Australia's e-safety guidance expects review pathways. Its public advice says that if someone 16 or older has an account removed or deactivated by mistake, the platform should give them a way to request review and correct the error. That appeal route is not a side issue. It reveals what age assurance really produces. Not truth in the philosophical sense, a status, a platform decision that can be accepted, challenged, reversed, or escalated. And the more normal these decisions become, the more important another problem becomes. How does a person know the request itself is legitimate? Australia's guidance explicitly warns about scams and phishing. If users become accustomed to age assurance requests, the regulator says platforms should clearly explain what legitimate verification looks like, including official branding, secure web addresses, whether a third-party provider is involved, and what steps the user will be asked to take. That is a strange side effect of making verification routine. A real request has to teach users how to distinguish itself from a fake one. And the context of the request matters psychologically. A normal marketing prompt can be ignored. A prompt framed around safety, legal compliance, or continued access carries a different kind of authority. That does not mean every person will comply without thinking. It means the request arrives with a stronger reason to feel mandatory. For the young adult trying to recover an account, the pressure is practical. They do not need to believe the system is malicious. They just need the account back. So imagine that the technology becomes dramatically better. Imagine the error rate falls. Imagine appeals are fast. Imagine the platform collects less information and explains everything clearly. Something deeper would still remain. Up to this point, this looks like a documentary about ways to check age. It is not. It is a documentary about age becoming a digital eligibility status. The system may never need to know exactly who you are. It still needs enough information to place you on one side of a threshold. And once that classification controls whether an account exists, whether a feed is available, whether a notification can be sent, or whether a category of content opens, age assurance stops being only an identification event. It becomes part of the architecture of choice. Classification, permission, experience. The most consequential age check may be the one that barely feels like a check at all. A user whose existing signals create enough confidence may pass through without friction. Another user, equally adult in the real world, may meet the gate because the system is less certain about them. The mechanism is visible unevenly. And if classification is the infrastructure, the next question changes. Not, can the internet verify age without revealing identity? But, can it prove eligibility while learning as little as possible? Europe is trying to build exactly that distinction into the technology. In July 2025, the European Commission released a blueprint for an age verification solution. By April 2026, the Commission described the system as feature-ready and available for customization by member states and market participants. The Commission calls it, informally, a mini-wallet. Its central promise is deliberately narrow. A person should be able to prove that they are over 18 without giving the online service the rest of their identity. Imagine an adult trying to enter an age-restricted online service. In a traditional document check, the site might receive a photograph of an identity document containing a name, birth date, document number, and other information. In the Commission's model, the age proof is designed to say something much smaller. Over 18, yes. That is the useful part of the identity document for this particular transaction. The rest is unnecessary to the service making the decision. The Commission says the system is designed so that the online service does not receive the user's identity or other personal information from the proof. It also says the proof provider should not learn which online services the person is using the proof with. The architecture is trying to separate three things that are usually bundled together: who issued the evidence, what age status it proves, and where the proof is presented. There is another privacy property hidden in that design. A reusable identity can become a tracking handle if the same identifier follows a person from service to service. The Commission says its age verification approach is designed to avoid that kind of linkability. The relying service gets the threshold result, while the system is designed so the proof provider does not receive a trail of the websites where the proof is presented. So picture the same adult using age proof twice, once for one restricted service, then again somewhere else weeks later. The goal is not merely to hide the person's name on each visit. It is to prevent those two visits from becoming an easy shared identity trail simply because the same age credential was used. That is a more ambitious definition of privacy than removing a birth date from a form. It treats the relationship between transactions as information too. That is a fundamentally different privacy model from uploading the same identity document to every website that asks. And the system has continued to evolve. The Commission says the current solution uses zero-knowledge proof technology, a cryptographic approach that can demonstrate that a statement is true without revealing the underlying verified data. In this context, the service receives the age status answer rather than the personal data used to establish it. This does not mean the system contains no identity information anywhere. Someone still has to issue or support the proof. There still has to be a trustworthy basis for the age attribute. The privacy gain is that the relying website does not need to receive the full identity package every time the proof is used. That distinction is easy to miss because the user sees only one action: tap, confirm, continue. Behind that small interaction is an architectural choice about who learns what. The European Commission has urged member states to make age verification solutions available by the end of 2026. As of May, it identified 7 frontrunners: Cyprus, Denmark, France, Greece, Ireland, Italy, and Spain. That is deployment work, not a universal mandate. The Commission's own material says availability depends on member states being ready. The blueprint can be customized into national apps or integrated with digital identity infrastructure, and the broader European Digital Identity Wallet rollout is also scheduled for the end of 2026. So this is not evidence that every person in Europe is already using one age app. It is evidence that governments are building reusable infrastructure for proving age thresholds with less disclosure. That is an important counterweight to the easiest version of this story. Age assurance does not have to mean sending a passport to every site. A better designed system can reveal less. But privacy-preserving proof does not erase every question. The person still needs a way to obtain a trusted age credential. Someone still has to decide what evidence is acceptable. The system still has to work for people without the easiest documents, devices, or enrollment paths. And the moment the proof becomes useful beyond one narrow setting, governance begins to matter as much as cryptography. What should the credential unlock? Who should be allowed to ask for it? How often? For what kind of experience? New York provides a different answer, and its answer moves the gate inside the product. On July 28, 2026, the New York Attorney General released final rules for the Safe for Kids Act. The law is scheduled to take effect on January 25, 2027. It applies to covered addictive online platforms, a defined category of services built around user-generated content and qualifying addictive feeds. The core restriction is not a blanket ban on minors using the entire platform. Instead, the law focuses on specific product features. A covered platform cannot provide an addictive feed to a covered user unless it determines that the user is an adult or, for a minor, obtains the required parental consent. The rules also restrict nighttime notifications to covered minors without parental consent. That distinction changes the meaning of the age gate. Imagine a New Yorker opening a familiar social app in January 2027. This is another reconstructed scene. The account still works. Messages still exist. The person can still access content. But the personalized feed that selects and prioritizes media based on information associated with the user sits behind an age status decision. So does a category of nighttime notifications. The question is no longer simply, "Are you old enough to be here?" It becomes, "Are you old enough to receive this version of the product?" The gate has moved from the front door into the interface. New York's final rules use the same broad family of age assurance methods we have already seen: estimation, inference, and verification. The Attorney General's office says companies can use methods such as asking for an uploaded image or video, or verifying an email address or phone number and cross-checking other information that reflects age. If a company offers government-provided identification as a verification method, the rules require another route in specified circumstances. They also explicitly recognize zero-knowledge proof age assurance. So an adult could potentially prove adult status through different kinds of evidence, depending on what a platform offers and what methods meet the rule's certification requirements. The rules also recognize uncertainty. If the available age assurance methods are completed and come back inconclusive, and the operator has no actual knowledge that the user is a minor, the rules can allow the user to be presumed an adult under specified conditions. That detail matters. A serious system cannot treat every uncertain result as guilt. It needs a policy for uncertainty. New York also requires an appeals process when a user is classified as a minor. The user must have at least one way to support adult status without relying on government-provided identification, and the operator has to provide a written explanation of its appeal decision. Then there is the data itself. The final rules say information collected for compliance must be limited to the minimum necessary, used only for that compliance purpose, protected with security measures, and held only for the minimum time necessary before deletion, subject to defined record retention exceptions. Some compliance records have to be kept for years, so the accurate version is not that all age assurance information disappears instantly. It is that the rules attempt to separate transient evidence from the records needed to show that the system complied. That may sound administrative, but return to the New Yorker holding the phone. A few seconds ago, they were using a social platform. Now a legal rule has changed, which interface features are available based on whether the platform can establish adult status. The person did not walk into an adult content website. They did not buy alcohol. They did not open a gambling account. They opened a mainstream digital product whose internal design now has an age-dependent layer. That is a different kind of normalization. Age does not only decide whether the person enters, it can decide what the software is allowed to do after they are already inside. And once the gate sits inside the product, the next question is not technological. It is constitutional. How far can a government push this burden before the safety objective collides with other rights? France supplied an unusually clear answer 5 days before this documentary was written. In July 2026, French lawmakers approved legislation that would have barred children under 15 from opening social media accounts and required existing accounts for under 15s to be closed within months. The system would have required age proof broadly. On August 14th, France's Constitutional Council blocked the relevant provisions. The court did not say that protecting children online was illegitimate. It said the way the measure was designed crossed constitutional limits. According to the ruling, as reported by Reuters, the provisions disproportionately interfered with freedom of expression and communication and failed to provide the legal safeguards necessary for respect for private life. The council also criticized the age-proof structure because the law required everyone to provide proof of age without sufficiently specifying the conditions and limits under which that proof should be provided. That sentence changes the political geometry of the story. A child protection objective can be legitimate. The mechanism used to pursue it can still be disproportionate. The French case does not prove that age assurance itself is unconstitutional. It does not create a general European ban on age checks, and the blocked under 15 restriction is not current French law. President Emmanuel Macron asked the government to rewrite the measure to address the court's concerns, with the stated aim of producing a new version before spring 2027. So the future remains open. But France establishes something essential. The phrase, "for children's safety," does not end the design debate. It begins a second one. Exactly what is being restricted? Exactly who has to prove what? What happens to the information? What happens to anonymous access? What safeguards exist when the system is wrong? And could a less intrusive design accomplish the same protective goal? Those are not objections to protecting children. They are questions about proportionality. They become more important, not less, when the goal is widely accepted. Because authority changes how friction is perceived. A platform asking for data because it wants better advertising is easy to recognize as a commercial request. A platform asking for data because a legal rule requires an age decision arrives wrapped in institutional legitimacy. For many people, that may make the prompt feel less like a negotiation and more like a condition. That is an inference about how the design can be experienced, not a claim about how every user will respond. But the product logic is already visible. A prompt appears. The user wants to continue. The reason says safety, law, or age requirement. The cheapest path is to satisfy the gate, and over time, repeated gates can make a new behavior feel ordinary. This is where the story becomes less about any one verification technology. For most of the mainstream internet's history, age was often handled with a weak fiction.
Enter a date of birth. Tick a box. Click, I am over 18. Or never encounter a visible age boundary at all. Everyone knew those systems could be inaccurate, but they had one social effect. Adulthood was usually presumed unless the user entered a space where age restriction was obvious. The emerging systems reverse that in selected contexts. They replace self-assertion with assessed eligibility. Sometimes the assessment is explicit. Hold up a document, take a selfie, use a credential. Sometimes it is nearly invisible. An old account, a verified record, a set of contextual signals. A result generated before the user even knows a question was being asked. The user-facing outcome can look identical. Access granted, access limited, more proof required. But those three words can conceal radically different privacy arrangements. In one design, a website may receive identity data. In another, a third-party service may estimate age from a face. In another, A platform may infer adult status from information it already holds. In another, a cryptographic credential may reveal almost nothing beyond the fact that the threshold has been met. From the user's point of view, all four may end with the same button lighting up. Continue. That is why the central problem is not solved by asking whether age verification is good or bad. The better question is what the gate is allowed to know. Return to the adult in Australia from the beginning. The account is still on the screen. Maybe the system accepts existing evidence and the person never sees a prompt. Maybe it asks for a face-based estimate. Maybe it offers a document and a non-document alternative. Maybe the account was flagged incorrectly and the person appeals. The exact path is not the point. The important event happened earlier. A space that once treated adulthood as an assumption now contains a mechanism for establishing it. That can be justified. It can be privacy-preserving. It can be badly designed. It can be proportionate. It can be excessive. Those are different judgments. But the design question is no longer hypothetical. It is being written into laws, regulatory guidance, technical standards, identity infrastructure, appeal systems, and product interfaces now. And the human cost or benefit will often be felt in moments too small to look historic. A teenager who cannot open an account. A 19-year-old proving that a classifier is wrong. A parent deciding whether to authorize a feature. An adult receiving a cryptographic over 18 proof instead of sending a passport. A user seeing a legally framed prompt and deciding whether continuing is worth the information being requested. These are small transactions. Together, they define what kind of proof becomes normal. The internet does not need to know everything about you in order to place you behind a gate. Sometimes it may need to know only one thing. But the moment that one thing becomes a condition of entry, the design of the proof becomes part of the design of freedom online. Age verification is not only infrastructure for identifying children. It is infrastructure for determining which users qualify as adults. When protection requires proof, what should the internet be allowed to ask from everyone else? The important question is no longer whether an age check exists, but what proof the gate demands. This channel examines the behavioral systems that quietly shape what people can do, choose, and access.